And there we go. We are live. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Vagabond Dog Industry Chats. This week we have Dave Oshry of New Blood Interactive joining us. Let's see. New Blood is a publisher specializing in. God, I mean, it's not a derogatory. The boomer shooter.
Yeah.
You guys have published Dusk, which is a very grim Quake-like kind of game. You've got Ultrakill, which is sort of the same sort of play style, but with like Devil May Cry style combo systems and score rankings, which is a real invigoration to the genre. And then you've got a Medieval, which is a fantasy take on the genre that's quite refreshing. And you have a very cute dog rolling around in the background. But yeah, plus a bunch of other games. I could go on listing them, but I'm curious how you would summarize New Blood Interactive for any devs watching.
Well, we're not really a publisher
Mm-hmm.
anymore. We kind of it's at the point where we kind of just do our own stuff. So we develop our own games, we then publish our own games, marketing, PR, all we're a one-stop shop. We do our own ports and shit too now. Um, so I would describe New Blood Interactive as I don't know, a group of friends hanging out in a Discord, making games and doing well at it enough that we get to keep making games and we're happy. Yeah, I guess at one point we were kind of like doing the publishing
Mm-hmm.
thing, but then like the people we brought in ended up all just, being like we all worked really well together because that was the point, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now our dream is for all the people working on all these projects. Our dream is to make one game together.
Right. Use everybody's
Is to
talents all
like
at once.
work on one game instead of like five or six or seven or whatever we're doing now. Um, so yeah, I'd describe us as I don't know, collective
A
of
collective. Yeah.
idiots.
Yeah, that's the thing. I was actually that was my first question. Is I've heard you describe the New Blood as less of a publisher and more of a pseudo developer, or a collective is the term I've heard you use
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, and I still get pitches all the time, which I love. I love just seeing everybody's. We have a channel on our Discord called Shitty Game Pitches. Not all of them are shitty, is like the little in brackets. But yeah, if there's like a first person shooter being made, like it's come across my desk. And I love seeing them all. I love giving people advice and stuff, but I have to let a lot of people down. I'm like, listen, we're not a publisher. We're not like we don't do funding. We're not interested. That's not our thing.
Mm-hmm.
I am not going to publish your game. I'm sorry. There's exceptions I would make. But we've gotten to a point where it's like even Ultrakill was hard to bring in. I had to lobby for like a year to get the guys to let me bring that in. Because they just didn't want to work on anything else. They weren't sold on it. And I was like, listen, this game's special. This guy's special. Hakata, he really wants to work with us. He knows all of us. He's going on podcasts talking about how much he wants to work with us. Like,
Right.
I think a little massaging the game could be a big deal. And now obviously it's our highest rated best selling game. So I was right. They can kiss my ass.
The it's interesting because like as over the last like 5 years or so, the landscape has kind of changed quite substantially, and I think publishing is becoming a riskier and riskier venture. Is that like it's really hard to say whether a game is going to make its money. It used to be you could just shotgun into a lot of marketing, and just by visual eyeballs on it, you would get a decent success. But is this a response to that, or is it just you didn't want to have to deal with a lot of not interlopers, but new people coming into New Blood and dealing with those publishing
Well,
contracts and that kind of thing? Or
every when we were kind of still doing like the indie publishing thing, or that's kind of what it wasn't like a conscious choice. The developers that kind of didn't gel or ended up outside of the box of the New Blood family, or the projects we ended up not working on or canceling. We had Tonight We Riot, and Maximum Action, two games that we don't work on anymore.
Mhm.
We had to part ways with the devs because it just wasn't working out. And if you look at both of those projects, those were developers who they were not they couldn't hang with the rest of the guys. It felt they didn't they felt like we would it felt like everybody working, and then we'd like these separate planet with these other devs, and it's
Right.
just like it did, it didn't make sense. And when we ended up, parting ways, I mean, those games are doing, their own thing now. We don't give a shit. But what I started to realize is that the people who didn't kind of fit in and work well with everybody else that it didn't make sense for us. Because as a publisher, you either have to keep everybody like that, where they're on the outside and you just work, or everybody's in it together. And we kind of, I think we work well with the everybody in it together thing. So um, once we got a really good team, um, we're good. We can make anything now. We don't, with all the talent we've got at New Blood, we don't have to search outside of New Blood to make any games, which is really cool.
Right. And now, has this clubhouse model yielded
Hmm.
any like substantial success yet, or how are you
New
finding
stuff.
it?
So like it's still so it's like so the thing that's really cool about it that I can describe is this cross-pollination. The thing
Hmm.
that people don't understand about New Blood. All New Blood games we could say like a game by New Blood, published by New Blood, but I made a conscious effort, however many years ago, David, when we were working on Dusk, people don't know that like five, six, seven people worked on Dusk. They just think it's a game by David,
Right.
which is by design. I really wanted to give the main developer of the game the spotlight. It's still his fucking game. It doesn't matter how many people helped with it. It's his game. It's his baby. Um, and I made a conscious decision that I was always going to highlight the devs whose project it really was. So, even though Ultrakill has four artists on it and a separate programmer and a New Blood QA team working on it, it's still a game by Hakita, right? Gloomwood is a game by David Szymanski and Dylan Rogers. Dusk is a game by David Szymanski. However, so Dylan worked on Dusk. David and Dylan now work on Gloomwood. Trey from Fallen Aces is our digital artist who does work on Gloomwood and now Fallen Aces. We have an internal dev support team who works on all the games. QA team who works on all the games. Airdorf, who is the guy that does Faith, um, you know, cross pollinates with our animators who do other stuff. So um, everybody gives feedback on all the different projects.
Hmm.
So it's gotten to the point where there's no problem we can't solve, which I think is one of the hardest things in indie development, especially when you're working in Unity or Unreal and stuff, and you're just like, fuck, you hit a roadblock, rock.
Hmm.
Whether it's with lighting or whatever it is, and there's no problem we haven't been able to solve. Especially like we did our own Switch port of Dusk, and we figured it all out ourselves. We got it all done. It runs at 60 FPS. Everybody loves it, and that took just a lot of learning.
Hmm.
But the cool thing about learning and growing together is that like now we can do it ourselves, right? We don't have to like outsource anything.
Hmm.
It's great. Like there's no question we can't answer ourselves. There's no development problem we can't solve ourselves. And on any of the eight, nine projects we're working on now, a lot that people know about and some that people don't know about, like they're all just moving ahead. There's no blockers, as they like to say in AAA, where you're waiting for someone else to do something or figure something out or having to hear back from, the engine company, or something like that. It's like, well, we don't have an answer from Unity and we can't figure this out, so I guess we're gonna have to go with this shitty solution. The
Right.
game's not gonna be what we want it to be. We don't have that.
Right.
Um, so that's been the real benefit of this whole collective, but it wasn't like a conscious thing. I wasn't like, we're going to be a collective of developers who all work. It just happened.
Right.
We're all just friends of friends and who started bringing in friends. Like, um, after we got done with Dusk, I didn't know who Dylan was, except that the guy who helped David finish the end of Dusk because he was having, programming issues with the final boss fight. And he's like, my friend Dylan's helping me with it. And then he goes, by the way, he's working on this like thief spiritual successor thing, Gloomwood. Do you want to take a look at it? And then Dylan put together a little slice for me to look at as a pitch, and I was like, this is fucking sick. I tell people like the first time I felt a doorknob in the Gloomwood thing and it did the little jiggle like they do in Thief, it like I was like, that's a Thief doorknob. That
Right.
this guy knows his shit. And the first time I played Ultrakill, and there was certain things about it that were just extremely like DMC, and I was like, this guy knows his shit. He's like, these developers that have this attention to detail is like such a big thing for me because I've got the ADD and the OCD real bad. Um, so when you end up bringing these people in and then finding out that they work really well together, and sometimes shit just works.
Hmm.
It was never like a conscious plan to get to where we are now, but like, it's working. So fuck it.
Right. No, I can see the even if it is accidental, the intelligence behind the model per se, because like talent retention is one of the hardest things in any company, especially entertainment, especially tech, and games are it's very easy, especially when you have um, creative individuals who can do a game on their own, creating an environment that
Mm.
facilitates them and helps them a lot is something so that's really important. How I mean, I know you're saying it's very accidental, but what were the steps you think that made the cohesion work? It's
Um,
very easy to put a lot of people together in a Discord and say, okay, great, now go. But like,
yeah, but that never works. Like I know a
right,
lot of people in like AA and AAA who think you can just hire a bunch of artists and programmers who've had worked, who have resumes, and just think a game's gonna pop out. It don't work that way.
right,
Um, I think what works is that we're in like the spiritual successor business, and business is good. Um, I think we've all kind of, got this affinity for the games we grew up with, and now we're old enough to make the kind of games like the games we grew up with. Everything goes in cycles. I think we're just like-minded individuals who like the same kind of shit, but we're all kind of critical of it. Um, and we're good at it. So I think a big part of it is that everybody respects everybody else.
hmm
Everybody respects everybody's individual talents. Like, the Fallen Aces guys really respect the Gloomwood guys. The Gloomwood guys respect the Ultrakill guys. Everybody really is impressed by the dev support team. Like our dev support team, Scott and Zombie, and there's no problem they can't solve, right? And everybody's just like, holy shit! Like, they come up with a problem, and Zombie's like, here's a script, fix your problem. It's just like, oh. And that's like that kind of resource in the company you work at is insane. It's like I can't figure out, controller rebinds for it's like, well, we just did, and there we go. And now you can move like letting the designers focus on designing, the programmers focus on programming the stuff that they like to program, and then the not so fun stuff getting handled by the dev support team, QA doing their fucking job well, and coming back and finding things that other people wouldn't find. Um, is just we're I like to say we're a well-oiled machine, but like it's pretty chaotic sometimes just with all the shit we do. We do so
hmm
many game updates and releases and stuff like that, and I handle all of the everything outside, everything besides, art and programming is me. Um but I think it's the fact that everybody respects everybody's opinion. Everybody is a fan. I think everybody's a fan of all the projects. um we're constantly going, what do you think of this, right? And everybody goes, oh, that's we work off of, we do a weekly meeting. Our Discord is just 24/7. It's an internal Discord with channels for each game and stuff like that. And they're all open. We don't have any private chats or any bullshit like that. Which is a funny thing because like, I talk to the guys a lot and I'm like, you guys realize that like, we shit talk and stuff on during the weekly meetings, and everybody got so much drama. There's so much drama. Every indie studio, every startup, and we don't have any of that. We have no
right,
turnover. We got no drama. We just fucking hang out and shit talk and fucking make our games and shit post on Twitter, um, and have a really good time. And I tell people like, it's possible. It's possible to just make games with your friends and have a good time. Um, but every week, we do the meetings, and we go game by game, and everybody shares their updates, what they've been working on, and I kind of set the milestones that we're working on, and they share stuff, and we screen share in Discord just like this. We screen share, and we go project by project, and everybody shows what they've been working on. Everybody goes, it's so cool. What if you did this? Oh, what do you think about this? And it's very collaborative. It's very fun, and it's there's no negativity, which is
hmm
something you see so much of, especially, indie studios can be so fucking toxic, because there's so many egos when you've got small projects, right? And we don't have any of that, even though we have created some imposters. um, just because, we spotlight stuff. David is always like, oh my God, I can't, I don't deserve all this. Am I really, but I'm like, Dave, dude, you're great. Everybody loves you. Everybody loves your games. Just shut up and, accept it you know. Um, Same thing with Hakata and stuff like that. But I love it. I love being able to put my devs on a pedestal. And really, be the guy behind the guy being like, no, go, go, take, the spotlight's fun, it helps sell the games.
so the I've been somewhat critical of the directorial, the name being, see, like, it's very easy to get the impression that Dusk or Ultrakill is made by one person and it's just published
Exactly.
by New
Yeah.
Blood, right? Which is a great marketing narrative, but it does have some negative I guess effect in the overall indie consciousness. You know, it
I think.
leads to a lot of
Yeah.
individual devs feeling like, holy shit, I'm garbage, look at what this one
Yeah.
person did. And then I'm also curious how you maintain the respect and acknowledgement when you are spotlighting an individual and their name is getting, you know, super featured, because
Yeah.
it's a
So I
problem
think.
that happens in a lot of studios.
Yeah, so I think, obviously everybody realizes, it's not for nothing, right? We did, Dusk is David's game, Gloomwood is Dylan's game, Ultrakill is, RC's game, Hakita. And I want to spotlight them because those are their babies, they're their brainchilds. Even if we've got, and I think a lot of it is that like our dev support and QA guys don't want to be like in the spotlight,
Right.
even though like, Cam, like people like ask who runs New Blood. I'm like, it's my QA lead, Cameron. Like he's the guy that runs the fucking company, but he doesn't want to be on Twitter and stuff like that. Um, and Scott, our dev support, and Zom and stuff like that. I think. It depends. I think if ever, as long as everybody's happy and comfortable, with the narrative, like David wanted to do it the other way. He said, when Dusk got to the point where, him and Dylan were doing programming, and then we had dev support, and QA is, QA. I try to put QA up at the top in the credits because, people ask what the difference is between our games and other indie games. I'm like, we don't have bugs, we don't have performance issues. Our games,
Mhm.
and like, how do you do that? I'm like, we have an internal QA team of like 3 or 4 people and they test the shit out of our games, and I pay them well enough. Um, I think when David said, we should just say it's a game, it's New Blood, a game by New Blood, developed by New Blood. I'm like, that doesn't feel right. It's your game. I want you to have that, and I think it does contribute a bit to the auteur developer. What's the word I'm thinking of? Not It's not a stigma. It's the opposite of that.
Right.
The
The
legend of the auteur
the
developer,
myth,
and
right?
there are some out there. But I think it's a net positive because we're all behind them on every project. Everyone's
Right.
behind David on Dusk. It's still his vision. Everyone's behind Hakeda on Ultrakill. Everyone's behind Dylan on Gloomwood. Even though on Gloomwood it was, it's a funny thing with Gloomwood because we've got David on there. It's a game by Dylan Rogers and David Szymanski. And not only because they share development duties, but also because David's a thing now, right?
Hmm.
And it like, people David's gotten to the point because of Dusk where people put his name on things because people know him as the Dusk developer. Um, and I think it's good for all parties involved, but it does give David anxiety. He has had a lot of imposter syndrome about being, David Szymanski, the Dusk dude, the guy who made that game, and now everybody are looking at his other games and even his small projects, like the DreadX stuff, like Squirrel Stapler, and like even his small tiny or his old walking simulator stuff like Music Machine and Wolf and Autumn, um, and people the pressure
Hmm.
now that people think he's this auteur developer. And David has to go, actually, people helped. A lot of people helped. New Blood is a, big collection of developers. Um, it's a balancing act. Everything's a balancing act. We don't do it for nothing. We don't credit single developers on the front of the poster for no reason. Same way, Fallen Aces is a game by Trey Powell and Jason Bond. Jason does the programming, Trey does the art and animation, but we also have the dev support guys behind them and stuff. But it's still their game. They brought it to us as a two-man project.
Right.
And I don't want to take that away from them, and I want to spotlight that because I don't know. I like making. I don't know. I like to joke about WWE a lot and Vince McMahon and shit like that. And I like pushing guys and bringing them to the forefront, and seeing them be successful and stuff like that. But I think it can get scary for them at times. Some people handle it really well. Hakata loves it. Hakata loves everyone thinking he's the best, and he just loves,
Right.
um, acting like hot shit on Twitter, even though nobody's ever seen his face. I've never seen his face. He's just an avatar. He's a Fumo. But some people like David have struggled with the imposter syndrome, and I have to tell him like you've earned it though. Like you legitimately have, and it's okay. And we're here to support you.
Uh,
So, yeah.
Definitely probably earned it. We've got a Music Machine fan in the chat, so
Yeah.
the I it's interesting because I've often tried to I had a bit of this issue with my own game. I knew how many people helped me on my project, and yet
Yeah,
when it came
I
to
didn't
the
know
press,
anybody from Always Sometimes Monsters except you. Yeah.
right, and then and that bugged me quite a bit for a while, and it's a thing that I've tried to dissect in the industry for a while, and it's funny to actually talk to you, New Blood, about it,
Mhm.
because I wonder how much of that is a holdover from the Carmack Romero, poster child for the game sort of thing that happened way back when, and it's just kind of echoed, or is what? Why do you think we we crave a personality identity to our art, specifically games?
I think relatable because like if it's just a game by company made by company, it's just company, right?
Mm-hmm.
New Blood's like a brand, right? Like we're cool and shit, I guess, but like without that person, you don't have that personal connection. Like people see David, the chubby, happy bearded dude that made Dusk, and they're the nice family man, and they're like, I can relate to that guy. They see Hakata, the Finnish, bisexual, anime avatar, and they're like, I can relate to that guy. They see Dylan, the guy who's obsessed with, Thief and stuff, and they're like, I can relate to that guy. So I think relatability is a big part. People want people. People like to be fans of people, not
Mm-hmm.
brands. I mean, well, that's not true. People love to be fans of brands, but not my kind of people. Fucking, well, but I think people, yeah, like to be fans of people and feel like they can be connected. If Dusk was just a game made by whatever, if we were called, Spooky Games Incorporated or whatever the fuck, people would know Dusk, but they wouldn't feel that connection to us. People know that Dusk is a game made by Hey um, made by David, principally David, Andrew, and me. Andrew Hulshult, which was the same thing I did. Rise of the Triad and stuff. Andrew's huge now in the music scene. He worked on fucking Doom Eternal and Quake. Um, so when people think about Dust, they think of me, David, and Andrew, and it was pretty much our brainchild. And we're the band, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people love to relate, to band members. They can see themselves in each of it. Like, I'm like that guy. I can make a game like that guy. I've got a dog that rolls around on the floor. What? Hi. I know you want to go to the beach. We'll go
Right.
soon. Go lay down. Go lay
Uh,
down. What a
okay,
podcast.
so I'm getting a sense of the collective and how it functions. If in a project, David, like Dusk, David is the lead guitarist and your QA is the drummer, then what are you doing, Mr.
Oh,
Mr. Oshry? What do
well,
you
I do.
what do you do?
So so besides having final say on everything, it's the way I describe how dusk levels are made is that like so let's say let's pretend it's would you stop back there? Go to mommy.
Never.
Saul. Go to mommy. Hey babe. Oh. Oh, stay. Um He's a good boy. So I think so. The way I like to describe how dusk levels are made, so David will take this massive clay, right?
Mm,
And he'll shape it a bit, and he'll go, "Well, what do you think?" And I'll take it back, and I'll go, and he'll go, "Ooh, that looks really good." And then we'll take it, show it to Andrew, and he'll go, boogity boogity boogity, music, music, sound, sound, And then we'll take it back to David, and he'll go, "Oh," and take it back to me, and then we put it in the kiln, then a level comes out. I think someone like David, especially without someone like me I smooth a lot of the rough edges for all our projects. And I think the guys have gotten to the point where what they call Dave crits,
okay.
where I see games as an end user sees them, right?
Right.
I am our target audience. I am our player base. And I think I have a unique perspective of someone who is not in the weeds of the project. So they'll cut off a level or a build and have me play it, and I will see things the way that the end user will see it. And I'm just like, no, a player's gonna get stuck here. This enemy encounter is not that fun. Um, I'm a big stickler for UI and UX when it comes to like menus and stuff like that and flow. I'm a big into flow, like how the game flows from the second you start it up to the second the end credits roll. I'm obsessed with that kind of stuff. So, like when we in Dusk, when we have the DOS screen, which flows into the main menu, which flows into, the intro to the game. I talk about what I do. I do a lot of encounter design, enemy encounter design, tweaking that, overall level design with, Dave and stuff. It's mostly, tweaks and edits, right? I look at other people's stuff and I try to make it um, better. Not necessarily better, but more palatable to the audience, you know? I
Hmm.
play it like an end user would play it or a reviewer. I used to review games, right?
Hmm.
So, I play it like someone who's, I think about games our games when I'm playing through them for crits as someone who's playing it for the first time. I always think like a first time player. And I only test our games on medium. I consider any difficulty harder and any difficulty easier up to the user. I play and test all our games on medium, and um, yeah, it's worked. It's gotten to the point where the guys trust that my feedback will always make the game better.
Hmm.
With Ultrakill, one of the things it was funny. It took me, like I said, it took me a really long time to get to convince the guys that Ultrakill was a game that we should work on. And I was like, why? I'm a lot of the times developers, especially programmers, don't see the forest for the trees, right? They'll play a little bit and they'll be like, eh, and I'll play it and I'll be like, do you not see what this could be? With a few tweaks and stuff like that. So I was playing Ultrakill, way before we worked on it with Hakata, and it was just the prelude at the point. Um, and I played it a bit, and I finally get to out of the prelude, and you get into Claire de Lune. No, not Claire de Lune. It's blah 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 blah. What's the fucking name of the level? Anyway, you get out there, and you finally get out of these orange and red tunnels, and it opens up, and it's clear sky and singing birds, and nice classical music, and I'm like, what the fuck? This isn't the game I thought it was. And I was like, the issue is people aren't getting to this point. We need to get people here to see the subversion. Most of our games are really subversive, right? You think there's something on the surface, and then you play them and you're like, what the fuck? Ultra Kills especially like that. But people weren't getting there. Even my QA guys, they played it for a few levels and they're like, I don't know, it's like kind of like Doom with a fucking Devil May Cry style meter. I'm like, no, no, you got to get to the part where like there's no enemies and you'll get to it. But what I realized is we're not getting people there fast enough. Where it was I and what I ended up doing is I worked with Hakata in secret for a few weeks and kind of just shaved stuff off and managed that intro to the game. So the intro was a lot tighter. It had that really cool rolling intro where you pick up the pistol and it goes ultra kill. You learn all the mechanics. It's a rolling tutorial, right? So we teach you everything you need to know about the game in the first couple of levels, and then immediately we get into the weird shit, the fun shit. It's like, oh, this game isn't what I think it is. Like I already learned all this fun shit, but now there's like it's flipping the whole idea of the game on my head, and I'm like, yeah. The problem was we weren't getting people there fast enough. And so once I did that with him, and then I represented the game to the guys, they're like, "Oh, this is sick," and I'm like, that's all it took, but you couldn't see the potential there. So a lot of what I do, and when bringing stuff in or just working on our games, is kind of it's funny. Like it's always the same thing. The guys will be like, "Oh, this is fucked. We'll never get this done," and I'll be like, "No, I just need to set a milestone, play through the game with the guys a few times and tell them what needs to be done and they'll get it done. Like Fallen Aces, the demo for Fallen Aces, I don't know if you played it yet, was really rough like a month before it came out. And they were like, there's no way. And I was like, no, I know exactly what we need to do. And I sat down with Trey and Jason and we played through it a few times and we tweaked the way the level worked and the flow of it. I always think like, a first time player, like I said, and we tweaked how everything from the second you land and you crack your knuckles to the ending comic, um so it feels like a really fun little cohesive experience. a lot of it is taking a machete to shit.
Hmm.
A lot of producers and directors are afraid to fuck. There's so many games I've played, and I'll tell the guys, I'm like, you know what this game needed, and they're like, a producer. Because, a lot of games really do. A lot of times games really need someone to just scope down and focus on the good shit. Because there's so many games out there that are just like too much bloat, and you forget the good stuff because you get lost in the bad. Um, so yeah, in terms of design and stuff, I do a lot of that.
Right. So it's it can be pretty hard as a dev to like. I agree. Devs should listen to non-devs,
Yes.
people who are not programming 24/7 about how their game plays and feels. But it can
Yeah.
be very hard, to build a trust there, especially how do I know you know what you're talking about? If maybe I
Exactly.
right.
So
So
that's like
how
the benefit of yeah. So that's how New Blood has ended up working is because we have that trust that's
Mhm.
been built up over the past like 6, 7 years. Um, the funny thing is I tried to do the same thing back when I was working on Rise of the Triad, but like these guys didn't know me. I wasn't proven. We didn't
Right.
know each other, and there was just so much back and forth between me and Frederick and Terry and stuff, and they didn't know who to listen to, and it was a really shitty development experience, but it was our first development experience, so we learned a lot from that. um and I think if you're not getting better with everything you work on, then what the fuck, right?
Right.
um so I think it's definitely hard. We're lucky that we've got that trust and we've got that experience, right? And the guys now come to me and say, Dave, you know, tell me how to make this better. Whereas, if you, it's weird. I don't know how it works at like a publisher, or if you don't have a producer, if you sign with someone or whatever, and they assign you a producer who you don't know, who just starts to tell you
Right.
what to do with your game, like that sounds fucking terrible.
Yeah. No.
So we're lucky in that way, I guess. But it's all based on trust, and I'm not the kind of producer who goes in. You don't want to be a helicopter producer, right? I watched this talk with Ted Price a long time ago. I think it was a dice talk. It was called Trust and Balls. Um, Terrible name for a talk, but it made sense. It was like you have to let people do their jobs. You don't want to be the producer who stands behind someone like this and goes, "No, no, I didn't tell you to do this. Don't do like that's the worst way because you just demoralize people, make them feel like shit. If you see something you think could be better, you go, well, what would you think if we did this? And it always ends up collaborative. You go, like I'm thinking of like Dusk, like E3M5, the cathedral level with the tornado and stuff. And it was okay at first. It had a really cool, like he had the cathedral. I don't know if you know the level where the tornado comes in and wipes everything away. It's a really iconic level in Dusk. Um, and he had the cathedral, which is an awesome set piece and the intro, but you originally when he had it, you just started the level and there was a ton of enemies and you're fighting them and stuff. And I'm like, this isn't letting you explore this level and get a vibe for it the way that I think would really sell it. So I said, you know what? Let's get rid of all the enemies. That you created this awesome set piece in the cathedral. The music that Andrew made for this level is awesome. I want people to just come out of this tunnel after being the level before it is a really claustrophobic level, right? So this one is really open. So I'm like, let's let people into this awesome level, this chanting ha hey ha type music's playing, this demonic shit. There's this awesome cathedral in front of you, and I want to let people explore it on all sides. So no enemies, right? So you come out of the tunnel and you could just explore it with all enemies. And I'm like, what would you think if we did that? And he's like, yeah, I really want people to see this. I'm like, yeah. And what would you think if we did kind of like child letting the dog in? Did like like Doom Eternal style gore nests instead, where you had to press a button and then the enemies spawned and
Right.
did that. But it allowed the player time to explore this set piece first, hear the music, get a vibe for the level, and then you get into the dun 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 dun. And when you press those buttons, music kicks in, and Andrew made stingers for that. And that's the kind of collaborative experience that makes a level better. I could have just looked at the level and been like, yeah, it looks good. The enemies come at you. It's fun. It's fucking dust. People will love it, right? But I said to David, like, what if we did this? And he goes, oh, that's a really cool idea. And then Andrew comes in and goes, well, what if we did this? And then we iterate. Iteration is the key, right? Stuff can always be better. And I describe it like making a statue with clay and shit like
Hmm.
that, because it could always be better. Um, and that's the relationship we have, that collaborative, iterative experience. And every level we make, I like to build games brick by brick, front to back, which is weird for some people.
Yeah, that's what I got.
When we were making Dusk, I wouldn't play a level until we were done. I considered the last one done, which
Hmm.
was nuts because David would work on a few at a time when he was feeling um, creatively, when the juices were flowing. And I'm also big on that as well, letting people work on side projects, making sure they're always, not rushing them. Because, like, if you're not feeling it, you work on
Hmm.
games. Like, if you're not feeling it, the shit you're gonna make's just gonna be like, it's gonna feel forced, right? Um, so yeah.
It's interesting hearing you walk through the cathedral, because now uh, what you had described previously as flow, I would call sequence, but now I hear your concept of flow, and I'm
Yeah.
curious if you can dive a little bit more into what you think makes good game flow. When I hear, okay, going from the claustrophobic to the open to a relaxed setting to, like, flow state is a very firm theory in games where you want the player
I
to
don't
be,
know. I don't. Yeah, this is
oh,
the thing. I don't read anything about, like,
gotcha,
theory and stuff like that. I was a used car salesman 15 years ago. Everything I learned about doing game stuff is from doing games. And
right,
then
right.
writing about games and then playing.
I mean,
Playing
I'm
games.
sure there's some analogs there where you mean, when you're working. I mean, I've also been a salesman before, and you
Yeah.
want to f- guide or flow that experience of from curiosity to purchase, right?
Yeah.
Same way you want players to ebb and flow through a game experience. But uh,
Yeah.
I guess what is your sense of flow? How do you guide your own concept of what flows well into each other?
I would say, well, for Dust, like, the first thing would be like, um, so I wanted every level, like, where every level started, the last one should end.
Mm,
And David was like, "Really? We have to do that?" And I'm like, "Yes, we're telling a story." And one of the things that I absolutely encourage every developer to do is, once you're done with your game, we make level-based games mostly, E1, M1, E1, M2. Um, hey, can you take the dog too, please? Okay. How's the turkey? Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
Um, you know, um, So I want where something ends, something else should begin. I'm like,
Right.
why that? It gives the player that sense of continuity, that, oh, I'm playing through a real space, and I'm playing through a story that someone's trying to tell me. We're not just throwing a bunch of rooms together and being like, video game. Um, so to me, that's flow. I'm big on um um hmm, every crazy, because I feel like a crazy OCD person, but, not only where something starts, something ends, but just the beginning and the end of your game are, like, the most important, because people tend to not remember the shit in the middle. They remember the
Yep.
end. Endings are so important. If your game doesn't end on a high note, hit. What is he eating? So go to mommy. The beginning is so, the ending is so, so important. The
Right.
Goodbye. Close the door. Thank you. Um, and I pressed David really hard on the ending of Dusk. He was, like, at his wit's end, and I was like, this is the last 10% of your game is so fucking important. Um, the way the ending flows into the credits, I'm a crazy person. Like, the way when you click a button, like, that flows into, like, the first, like, as soon as you can move your mouse.
Hmm.
Um, the bits of Dust that I harped on the most, like that whole ending with Stephen Waite, the monologue there. We redid that a million times. I wrote that. I timed it by actually walking up my own stairs, and reading the monologue while doing it to see how it would feel in the game, and recording that and showing it to David. Um, So for me, like actual real life flow, how it would, how the player feels. Like I play these games in like a dark room with the sound up and everything off to see how it, how it feels. And I everything, and the guys give me shit sometimes, and it's like a joke, my OCD. But like, I'll get the metronome out if like the timing doesn't feel right. I don't give a fuck. I want um, everything to flow into the next thing, and I want to create experiences for the people with this stuff. A lot of times developers will be like, it's good enough, and I'm like, it's not, it can always be better.
Right.
um so yeah, it's enemy, like with the kind of games we make, enemy encounters are a big deal, and those encounters, tweaking them, we're not Doom Eternal, right? We're not building chess. But it should always fun. We like to build rooms that are fun to fight in, enemies that are fun to fight in the right order, um, and giving you the tools to do that. And then sometimes doing funny shit and knowing when to do funny shit. Like Big John, obviously, right? He's a meme with New Blood. Um, and like some people, it was controversial, like, oh, we shouldn't have like a guy doing an Arnold impression in the middle of the game. I was like, do you laugh when you get to it as a new player? When we watch people play it, do they start cracking up? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, then it works. But then at the same point, there's the juxtaposition. I like to do a lot of that where you give something someone really, like I was saying, where you get the claustrophobic and then the open, or the super fast metal and then the atmospheric, or even that. So you could do the same thing within like a couple of minutes in a level. So in that level, which is the Erebus reactor in Dusk, and we're talking about Dusk a lot, but we make other games besides Dusk. But Dusk was the one where I was really in the weed. I'm in the weeds with all our games, but Dusk was it was a collaboration between the three of us. um in the Erebus reactor, we had this moment where you finally get out of this giant room where you're fighting, like, it's the most enemies you fight at once, right? You can spawn like 100 enemies in that room, and then you finally get out and the music calms down, you push a lever, and the ceiling opens up and you realize that like there's a giant sky above you, and you're like, what the fuck, right? It's a big what the fuck moment. And just getting the players to look up, what modern games would do would take the camera away from the
Right.
player and go whoa, and play it as a cutscene. We don't do that in our games. It's like gospel. So we had to do so many different things. I was like, it opens up, but if players don't look up, they don't get the moment, right? So I was like, let's make sure the sound's really good. So it was clink, clink, and like people still weren't looking up. So I'm like, fucking screen shake. Screen shake is one of my things. I'm always like, add screen shake, that'll work. So let's shake the screen. Let's open the thing. And then eventually got to the point where most players looked up, right? And it's a really cool moment. Oh, and I had David like adjust the sun so you get like the lens flare when that happens. So it's like, look up, motherfuckers. It's hard to get people to look up
Oh
when
yeah.
they don't have to. It's hard to get players to do anything, right? When they don't have to. That's why modern games just take the camera away and make you look at the thing, right? God forbid you miss these assets that the artists
Right.
work so hard on. And then there's an Arnold impersonator with a machine gun that jumps out and he goes, yeah, yeah, ha, ha. So you go from, oh, this is really cool to what the fuck, this is really stupid. And I love that. I love that we can do that in our games. Um, and then when it works, and it tends to work. Um, so yeah, collaboration, but that's all flow, right?
Hmm.
And it for me, it needs to flow from the silly to the ridiculous to the serious and feel plausible. That's a word I use a lot,
Right.
which is weird because there's so much supernatural shit in our games. But I like, this should be plausible. It should be real. One of the moments that I bring up a lot was in E1 M2 of Dusk. There's a goat behind one of the demonic goats is behind one of the houses. And it was just an enemy that David placed there. He just placed it there because it was it's a good place to put a demonic goat behind a house. And I said to him, well, why is he back there? How'd he get there? And he's like, what? And I was like, well, why is the goat back there? Did he break off of his thing? And I was like, he's like, I don't fucking know. I'm like, what if we just added a little post and a little chain so it looked like the goat,
Right.
got off of his post back there? And he was like, I guess I could, sure. But that's like at the time it was me being pedantic, right? I was just
Right.
like, well, I guess Dave just being Dave. And we were watching some streamer play it. And he gets there and he goes, "Oh, look, the goat escaped." And I was like, "See? Plausible." He thought
Right.
the goat escaped because we created a little thing and it looked like the goat broke off his chain and became a zombie and escaped from that area. So even though our games are silly and retro and supernatural, I like plausibility, and that kind of feeds into the whole thing where like one level ends where one level starts. You feel like, sure, this could be real. It's supernatural, but it's like it makes sense. Um, so yeah, that's what I'm talking about when I talk about game flow. With Ultrakill, it's a lot different. It's
Yeah.
mostly about making the combat. I did an interview not too long ago where I talked about how I am with each different game. With Dusk, I'm very hands-on. With a medieval, not that hands-on. It's mostly enemy encounters. A lot of what I do is because I am the baseline for New Blood because I am not good at games. So like I said,
Mhm.
I am median. We've got this rule like if Dave can beat it, anyone can beat it. Um, so a lot of what I do is just enemy encounters, like the amount of I'm like too many enemies, not enough enemies, different kinds of enemies, not fun enough, too fun. This room isn't fun to fight these guys in, that kind of shit. But with stuff, and that's like stuff with Ultrakill, medieval. With stuff like Gloomwood and Dusk, I'm a lot more involved with aces. It's a lot more. We're still in the early stages of flow. With Faith, um, Airdorf is, kind of one of those auteurs, because he does it all himself. We just QA it. He doesn't need any help with Faith. Mortis is its own fucking brand, right? Um, but for me playing through those, that's a lot about flow. But he's a master of that. So a lot of times I'm impressed with, the way that he gets things to flow into another. You'll be playing, you'll be walking around doing spooky stuff, and then like one of those rotoscope cutscenes will show up
Mhm.
before you even expect it, and it'll really just add to the experience, and you're like, this is really good. Um, if anything at Faith, sometimes I'm like its direction. I don't want to make it's funny because the games that we make used to have maps. None of our games have maps. Because back in the day, you'd get lost in a Doom level
Right.
or a Quake level and stuff. And people are, what I found, they never ask for maps in our games. Occasionally, you know why? Because the levels are designed so they feel like the old games, but they're actually really easy to navigate and stuff like that. And that's just going back and making sure the player is always has things communicated to them well without holding their hand, which it's a fucking lost art because you don't have to anymore. You can just show them the goddamn way.
Right.
Um, but we don't do
Objective
that. So a
marker.
lot more, yeah, a lot, yeah, no, the giant arrow over
Yeah.
your head showing you where to go. We've had a bunch of people, I've been joking around on Twitter with a medieval. We've gotten some negative reviews from people who get like lost in the level select screen or the difficulty selection, because it's got like Quake where you can go to the different. It's just like,
Right.
fuck, man. But yeah, it's a lot more design goes into the kind of games we make than you would think. Um,
Oh no, there's no
but
doubt.
for me,
It's not,
yeah, for
never
me,
easy.
yeah, for me, it's but when I talk about game flow, that's what I'm talking about, making sure everything feels from the player's perspective at first. So like I always pretend I'm someone who has never played our games or,
Hmm.
a reviewer who, from some outlet who might not, be familiar with retro shooters or Doom and Quake and shit like that. How would they feel? Can they get into it? And I always say Dusk is the most successful of these retro shooters, not just because it was the one that kind of kicked off the new wave, but because it's the most accessible. Anyone can play Dusk and bunny hop around and feel like a superhero, And then we've got the one that's the most mechanically involved in Ultrakill. It's kind of like it's got mechanics like Doom Eternal and then some. But we've that one's got the most accessibility options. You could slow the game down to 10% and make all the enemies have giant highlights on. You know,
Right.
I want people to beat our games. I want people to get through them. So I think that's a big part of it. I want our games to be playable by as many people. I want to bring new people in to retro shooters. Like so when we did Dusk on Switch and it like feels and controls better than the fucking PC version. I was like, yeah, I want someone who plays Animal Crossing to see the trailer for Dusk and be like, "Oh, that looks cool," and be able to get through the game.
Right.
Not just old school PC Quake diehards.
Right. I was gonna. I did have a question here about that because it is kind of essential for you to bring new blood into the new blood
That's what we
genre because
do.
you can play into nostalgia so much, but a lot of players age out.
Yeah.
Genre tastes change, so um, it's one thing to but like we've talked a lot about how you make the game inviting to a player who has decided, okay, yes, it does look cool, but how do you convince them this retro looking game that's not actually a tried and true remake, right? Like it's not, oh, here's this like proven amazing game from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
um how do you convince a new player who's grown up on Call of Duty and Fortnite and Halo that that something with this retro vibe and the mindset is was worth trying?
I mean, you don't, right? Their friends do.
Gotcha.
So I always say start with your people, right? So many people with these indies and stuff, like they try to like make a game and then show it to everybody. They
Hmm.
blast it out to everybody. They try to get IGN and GameSpot to review it and shit. I don't give a fuck if IGN never reviews one of our games. I hope they do, and they give it a 2. I'll get more sales out of that. Um, no, I sell our games to our people, and then those people have convinced their friends that they need to start trying these kind of games. It's not our job. It's my
Hmm.
job to sell these games to people I know are going to enjoy them, right? And then hope that they're going to pass it on. Like, I'm not going to, like if I ran can you imagine if I ran an ad for Dusk during the Game Awards? The people would be like, "What the fuck is this? What is
Right.
this fucking like blocky PS1 looking shit?" Like, we get those comments on the Dusk Switch trailer every day. Like well, because it's gotten popular with the algorithm, and it's people think Nintendo made it. They're like, "What is this? Nintendo sucks. What is this? A '90s game?" It's like,
Right.
yeah. Um, it's not my job to convince those people. It's those people's friends of friends who have actually enjoyed our games to be like, no, you need to try this. And we've seen a lot of that, and that's how this scene has grown. This retro shooter scene, this boomer shooter scene that we've gotten up to where it's gone from Dusk and stuff, gotten to all the way to like Realms Deep, which is an entire show just of retro shooters.
Right. 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 It's really interesting when I hear the criticisms, the graphical criticisms being like, this
Yeah.
game looks ancient, and it always strikes me as a really interesting sort of developmental style difference, because like Quake and Doom and all the Apogee games, these were games made to the best of possible ability. They
Yeah.
were pushing as hard as they could to make something that, is as future proof as possible. I mean, and now it of course looks like it does now. But all of the New Blood games have the limitless potential, right? You don't have to look like a retro game, and I'm curious how you personally speak to the difference in developmental approach from trying to do the best you can visually and everything to intentionally limiting yourself to fit the aesthetic.
Well, I think with the thing is, it takes a lot longer now that we're like not in. So with Gloomwood, shit's taken a long time because we're being very, very detailed with everything. Um, Ultrakill as well has artists on it. With Dusk, it was just David. Um, and the funny thing is now we're like redoing all the models and weapons in Dusk. And HDing them so they look like what modern retro games are supposed to look like these
Right.
days. But for us, it was just about putting gameplay first. The fun thing about Dusk is no matter how many times I pitched Dusk or whether it was the Metacritic PC Game of the Year 2018, every time I show it to somebody new, I have to sell it like it's there. They look at it and they're like, "What the fuck is this Minecraft with guns?" It doesn't matter how many copies it sold or how well it's reviewed. Like if you don't know that, you look at it and you're like, what is this shit? And part of me is like, oh my God, really? I still have to fucking, sell people on Dusk. And part of me is still, um, uh, you know, proud that I have to, it's still
Mm-hmm.
sub I love the subversion. I talk about that a lot. Where like it looks like this, like what is this? Some like knockoff Quake clone. And then you play it and you're like, oh, it actually does a lot of stuff that these games couldn't do and wouldn't do. Um, yeah, but now, so it's funny because we're kind of evolving at the same time. So if we started with like 1996 graphics and now we're getting into like the 99, 2000, 2001 Source or Dark Engine looking
Right.
games that are a lot more detailed, We're being a lot more detailed with them. So and now we've got the resources. We didn't have money when we made Dusk. It was just, now we've got money, we've got games. So there's no excuse for us not to. It's funny, the big thing with Dusk is the fact that it didn't have hands, right? And when we originally showed Gloomwood, it didn't have hands. And I'm like, I don't think we can get away with that anymore. We gotta give the player hands and animate them and animate all the guns and stuff. And that becomes a whole pipeline of shit you have to do. People don't realize the difference in just, the reason, if Dusk had hands and animations and, and high poly models and weapons and all that stuff, it would have taken a lot longer than it already did. Um, Art takes a long time, animation takes a long time, and iterating on all of it takes a long time. Um, so I think, now that we can, there's no excuse for us not to. But I
Mhm.
still love the fact that I have to sell Dusk to people 3 years after it's come out and it's been wildly successful and it's like a cult classic and all that shit. Why not?
Well,
Um,
I mean, it speaks to the fact that it is something. I mean, it's different in the marketplace. It's not what people are used to seeing all the
yeah.
time, and there's something fresh to it, even if they aren't immediately comprehensive of it at first
Yeah.
glance. Um, I guess the one big thing, if your team at New Blood is relying on you to be those player focused eyes,
Yes.
how and comment on flow, how do you personally retain that um first glance uh intuition, even though you've seen the game for so long, and even though
That's a
you're
good
not smacking the
question.
code, but you're in it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I always play, it's weird. I get myself in this mindset like I try to forget that I've ever played the game before, right? I
Mm-hmm.
always play the game like if I didn't know what I pretend I have no idea what to do. I pretend like if I was like, Fallen Aces, for example, the when we have this demo and the first thing they had um in the demo was there was like, you land on this rooftop. It's a Duke 3D reference. You look up at the sky. You're on the. It's literally you crack your knuckles. It's like it's an homage to Duke 3D when he lands in Hollywood Holocaust, right? And the first thing Mike and Trey and Jason had, there was like a key and there was like a locked gate, and you unlock the thing and you go into the thing and you hear the first VO from Nightwave, and I'm like, that's not the first thing I want to do in this fucking game. I've got a kick button. The first thing we should have the player do is kick the fucking gate down. Like that would be really cool. I want people to immediately know that Mike's a fucking badass and he could fucking mighty boot shit. So I was like, no, we'll move the key tutorial to later where we'll have I had them hide a key in an event and then we have a locked gate and I'm like that'll be where the players learn about keys and locks, right? And some games don't tell people stuff like that. I'm very big on tutorialization. A lot of people, especially in our genre, assume that people should know everybody. Oh, it's a retro shooter. People know how to find keys and doors and WASD and shoot and shit like that. I'm like, yeah, they do, but you still have to tell people how your game works
Mm-hmm.
and what button does what, right? So like Q to kick and you kick the thing down. Um, so I played it as someone who not only as someone who's never played the game before, but what would be really cool, right? If I'm someone playing this demo for the first time, like what would be a really cool thing? What do we want to show people? Like, you have to show people there's people indie devs a lot of times they hide like the coolest shit in their games. They can't wait for people to find that. I'm like,
Yeah,
fucking
no,
show it to them.
no, I'm
Show it
guilty.
in the trailer too. They're like, oh, we can't show that in the trailer. I'm like, well, you want to sell the game or not? There's a fucking like if you've got a giant sandworm that eats people, like, oh, we got to save that so people like no, show people, put it in the fucking trailer, have it at the end of the trailer, have it eat the logo, like um devs are really, really, it's weird, like they want to do really cool stuff and then not show it and like hope that it becomes a surprise. I'm like, that doesn't happen with most games. You gotta
Mm-hmm.
show the cool shit. You gotta put that forward. um
Yeah, I've seen the stats.
yeah, it's
It's like 0.5% saw. There's so much content in my games that ended up getting freaking buried
gotta
because of that
so I
attitude.
try to put myself in the mindset of someone who's um just trying to have a good time. For a big thing is also with difficulty, it's like, is the game unfair or am I bad, right?
Mm,
When I fail at Super Meat Boy, I never feel like the game's unfair. I feel like I fucked up,
right.
which is fine. You never want to feel like the game is fucking with you. or the game is unfair. Romero does. Romero will fucking put two fucking cyber demons behind a push wall or some shit. 'Cause he's an asshole. But he loves that kind of level design, right? I don't want to do that kind of stuff. I don't like fuck you level design. I know some people really like that masochistic stuff.
Hmm.
And John did a lot of that with Sigil, and I did not get through Sigil because it was like fuck you hard, right? Um, Not my thing. I appreciate the design, but not my kind of thing. Um, like I said, I want everybody to be able to get through our games. I don't want them to ever feel unfair. So when I put myself in the mindset of like a new player, um, that's how I'm playing our games. I want to make sure we teach everybody everything you need. I've got this saying: you're only on the hook once. You only got to tell the player once.
Right.
If you show the player how to do a thing, and they fuck up later, that's their fault. That's not your fault because you taught them how to do it. You showed them the fucking tutorial. If they ignored it or they forgot it, that is not your fault.
Still gotta
So if I
teach them right though.
yeah, so like let's say for instance, oh well, this is a thing I learned really early on. So Rise of the Triad 2013, I learned so many lessons from working on that game because it was our first game. Um, we have a button that was Q to knife, right? We never tell you any of the controls. And the only way there was these enforcer enemies that would catch you in a net, just like the original game. And the way to get out of the net is to knife it with Q. We never tell you there's a knife. We never tell you Q does that. So we'd watch people play the game and they'd just get stuck in the net till they die. Because we
Right.
never told you there was a way out. And like that permeates even still to today. But I didn't, back then I had never made a game before. I was the marketing guy on that game. I wasn't the designer. I didn't have, design feedback and stuff. But like I just remember watching streamers and YouTubers play the game and being like, why can't they get out of that? I don't understand. You use Q to knife, and then I realized like we never told them there was a knife. We never told them Q did that, you know? And you only got to tell them once. It only has to be a second. Like in Dusk, we tell you that the crossbow shoots through walls and stuff like that the first time you
Hmm.
get it. And then we line up a whole bunch of enemies so you can shoot through a whole
Right.
bunch of enemies. That's another thing, that's a Doom thing, right? If you give someone a new enemy, give them a bunch of fucking shit to kill with it.
Hmm.
The first time we give you the assault rifle in Dusk, I told David to have a bunch of rats come in the room, so then you can just shoot a bunch of rats. The first time we give you a crossbow, we line up a bunch of cultists, so you should because it goes through. It goes through anything. And then we tell you that again later in the game in case they forgot. But you have to teach people how to play your fucking game, no matter how simple your game is. So I remember, Serious Sam 3, or whatever it was. They sent out reviewers guide, and it was Devolver. It was just a joke reviewers guide. It said run and shoot, because it's Serious Sam, right? That's what you do.
Hmm.
But Serious Sam is more involved than that. The different enemies have different patterns and shit like that. But for the most part, even if your game is as simple as run and shoot, you have to teach people how to play it. And you're only on the hook once. And the more fun you can make those tutorials, like for instance, Ultrakill with the running tutorial, as soon as you land, the game's starting and the credits are rolling as you're playing it, right? Um, Dusk, we throw you right into the fucking fire, which was my idea. The whole kill the intruder thing, where they immediately get rushed by three guys. That was more of a you go learn today, right? Like you figure it out. And if you die, you
Right.
start over. But like we immediately want you to figure that stuff out. But then we teach you how to pick up boxes immediately, how to use your flashlight immediately, how to crouch. And we teach you all that in the first level. Plus, you learn really quick about how to not die because three, chainsaw wielding maniacs run at you, and it worked. I was skeptical at first when I came up with the idea. I'm like, is this going to be too hard for people? Are we throwing people into the fire too soon? But it worked, and people love that intro. Um, so yeah, and it's different for every project. Um, no, it's I don't know. I just do. I just put myself in the mindset of our players. And the guys trust me to do that, and I'm right a lot. I'm like I know exactly. I do it for other people's games too. Like we'll play a game, and I'm like, I know exactly what reviewers are gonna say when they get there. I know exactly what people are gonna say when they get there, and then we'll watch a YouTube video. I'm like, hey, fucking told you so. So I don't know. I think it's just one of the things I've got a knack for, and the guys appreciate it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you kind of just said. I was gonna ask if it's a bit of a holdover from the freelancer days or Rip 10 and reviewing
Yeah,
and
no,
marketing.
I've got a really unique perspective of someone who used to review games. and then did marketing and PR for games, and then worked in I've worked on every side of the game industry at this point, so like I've got a really unique perspective of how people think about final product games that developers who are just in the weeds programming or doing art don't, and I think it's definitely one of the benefits to the way our games come out.
I guess as we start to wind down, I've been meaning to ask this. You recently moved to New Zealand,
Yes.
and I'm very curious. How does the game dev culture in New Zealand compare to New York?
Well, it's a slower pace down here. Stuff's cool, stuff's good. Down here in Dunedin, South Island, where I live, they're trying to foster a little scene because we've got gigabit Ethernet,
Right,
and the university, and we got some government funding now, which is really cool. They're trying to get a lot of indie startups going. Um, it's cool. It's more laid back. A big part of the reason I moved down here is that I had started going to PAX Oz in like 2016 or 2014. Fuck, I don't know. I just really liked it down here. I like the game dev scene, all the Australian devs, some New Zealand devs. Um, that's how you end up with stuff like Goose Game, which House is in over in Melbourne, right? Um, you know, cool laid back devs with government funding can make cool shit. We don't have any of that. I just live here. Um, but yeah, it's the scene's cool. I like it down here. It's a lot less stressful. I'm from New York and I lived in California for 10 years. So it was like, and now I'm down here where it's like, um, yeah, a lot less, a lot more humble. Kiwis especially, or are very humble folks. They don't want the spotlight. They're like, oh, I think my game's pretty good. It's like, no, your game's great, dude. Um, but yeah, I like it. That's one thing, and it's growing, which I think is really cool. It's a growing scene. It's not like up in GDC in San Francisco where everybody's trying to fucking kill each other to get funding,
right.
by the publisher who's gonna take like 60% of their net or some crazy shit like that. It's a growing scene with cool laid back devs, diverse, which is cool. Yeah, and there's no better environment to do it in, so I'm a fan. I'm really happy down here.
Good. That's always good to hear. I'm always happy
Yeah,
when people are happy with their dev environment and the culture that they're around.
super happy, and also like no COVID,
Oh yeah,
which is
right,
lovely.
right. Yeah. I don't know. I've been a work from home for the past decade, so
Yeah, the
it's
same
not
for
not a
me.
huge
I was working
difference.
from home, and now I'm working from home in the one part of the world where there's no COVID, and I'm like,
Right,
I've had very lucky.
right. But peace of
So
mind.
yeah, I'm happy. And it's been a great environment for you to do New Blood stuff. So we were gonna open an office for New Blood
Mm,
in Erie, Pennsylvania,
okay.
the the chestnut of the northeastern U.S. We had a contract, we had a lease, and then COVID hit.
Interesting.
Um, Never happened. So we just stayed. We work fine virtually. We were gonna open an office because we thought it was gonna be like a thing to do, and we'd have
Right.
a lot of our guys are in the northeastern U.S., either in PA or Massachusetts and stuff like that. We would have been able to get like probably like five, six, seven people in that office, and I would have visited and stuff. It was really cheap.
It
Um,
it feels like a necessity until you actually think about
yeah,
it
and
too
then like
much.
fucking why? We work fine from home. I can pay
Hmm.
people more. And we do fine. It felt like I don't know, it felt like a thing to do a thing to do, right? Um,
Right.
so
That's
yeah,
that's when you know
down here.
you've made it too well. You can if you're
Yeah.
starting to
Hey,
get
listen, we're
on.
not doing that well. We do. People think we're like a real. We get job applications from people at like Sony Santa Monica and shit. It's like we're not a real company, dude. Like I appreciate, like I'm
Right.
flattered, but like we are still very much like a bunch of people working in a Discord, doing whatever, making enough to keep going.
Mhm.
And I like that. I'm very happy with the way things are going. It's funny. I get asked a lot, like, what are your dreams or aspirations for New Blood? I'm like, this?
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
want to do shit. I want to do less.
Uh,
I want shorter games. What's the saying? I want shorter games with worse graphics made by people who are paid more to work less, and I'm not
right.
kidding.
Right.
That's absolutely it. I remember like a few years ago, I was at like GDC or Dice and something, and my guy went to me. He's like, when did you stop climbing? You know, I thought it was gonna be you up on that stage one of these days. I'm like, I don't want to be on a fucking E3 stage. You out of your goddamn mind? That sounds like pressure. That sounds terrible. Is my mom on the phone?
Yeah.
Hi, Ma. I'll be out soon. I'm doing a podcast.
All right.
Love you too, Ma.
Well.
She's calling for Thanksgiving, but like I was like, no, I think the trick to life is like you see, like great examples of climbing too high. Like, what's his name? The CEO of CD Projekt, right?
Mm,
He looks like a fucking drogger these days, because it just the life force has been sucked out of him. I met him when he was working on Witcher 2. They did a press event. He seemed like a fun, happy dude, and now he's just like, I am sorry, we fucked up with Cyberpunk. Um, and that's like climbing too high on the ladder. I think life is about knowing when you're good to like I'm gonna get off here. And I think that's really like I'm really happy with where New Blood's at, where the devs are at. For me, it's just like I would like, to just keep rewarding the people we're working with now and making less games and paying people more.
mhm,
That sounds like fun and like, I live near the beach. People like our games. We're happy. We're not crunching. I mean, we do, we hustle sometimes. Um, but like, we see all the shit that's always going on with other indie devs or big companies and stuff, and like we're happy we're not them.
mhm, mhm.
Um, so that life's good.
That's good. I'm very
Yeah.
glad to hear that. It's good to be happy with where you are and always working, but not necessarily wanting. If we want to get very Buddhist about it.
Yeah.
Um, right. So I mean, you've got a call with your mom. You got to get to.
It's fine. I don't want to talk about my
Kind of it's Thanksgiving. You must.
mom.
Is there anything you want to tell the people to check out? I mean, now's your time.
Just all the games, man. So we've got, the stuff coming out next year. We're finally gonna get Gloomwood and Fallen Aces into early access. The expansion for Medieval, the Black Labyrinth. We're still finally gonna get Dusk, the SDK and Steam Workshop and co-op out. More console ports, which is really cool because more people can play our games. Trying to get Xbox and PlayStation done, but like, we're fucking lazy. I'm lazy. My devs aren't lazy. I'm lazy. I'm the one that's got to do the fucking work and get all that shit done. Um, but yeah, just it's what is it? We hate dot money is the Steam thing. All the games are on sale right now because it's like the Steam Thanksgiving
Yeah.
sale or whatever. We sell lots of merch. Always try to come up with fun new merch ideas. Buy an Ultrakill body pillow. Those are gonna put my kid through college. Um, yeah, just yeah, fucking if you know New Blood, you know where to find us and play our games. Just play our games, give us feedback. That's all I want, player feedback. That's the
Right.
one thing I miss about doing trade shows, like PAX and stuff, is
Mm-hmm.
just being able to stand behind someone and watch them play your game and just get that, pure unadulterated, feedback and seeing where they get stuck and stuff like that. Because like there's no matter how much of a knack I have for, game design or anything like that, you can never get better feedback than just watching some random kid walk up
Mm-hmm.
and play your game, and then get really sad when they put the controller down and walk away because they didn't like it. It's
Oh yeah. Yeah. Wait until you make a narrative heavy game.
yeah, those are not good
XXXX. Oh
controllers.
no.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man.
Anyway, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you, and yeah, wishing you all the best and have a great holiday. And thank you for coming by and chat. I'll see you when I see you. I guess I think we're gonna go see Riggy because he's releasing his game soon. So we gotta go cheer him on. Goodbye, everybody. See you later.